Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'll open the Crow Wing County Committee of the Whole meeting for November 17th, 2020. Just for the record, Commissioner Coring is joining us via Teams. In the boardroom, we have Commissioners Franzine, Hogue, Brecken, and Barrows. With that, we'll move on to number one, which is a tax forfeited land discussion to be led by Gary Griffin.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Today, we're hoping to get consensus on some direction that we can bring to a future county board meeting as to how to handle land sales in our county. A little history, in 2017, we brought forward a land asset management policy that you all have in front of you. And that's really our guiding document as to handle all numerous things that we have to do in the forfeiture process. One of the things is once property goes forfeit, it's to determine, do we want to keep it and manage it for timber or recreation? Or do we think it's better served back in private ownership, which typically leads to property taxes on that property? And we go through a conservation, non-conservation determination. Currently, in this policy, our guidance is anything deemed and identified as non-conservation is to be sold back to the public, not to stay in public ownership, but private ownership. And so in that, 2019 and into 2020, we've come into a couple of interesting scenarios where it's typically had been prior to 2017 when we had identified properties to go for public auction. A lot of our lands are really small lots, odd-shaped things that weren't maybe the most sought-after pieces of property. And usually nobody would say, don't sell it, don't sell that, and it was just kind of rolling through the years. Well, what happened was in this, we also updated our strategy on how to amass our holdings to make them more contiguous if we can. So we have 105,000 acres of public land that the county manages currently, roughly around that. I'm asking Ryan to get us a current count and we're going to kind of go over what's happened the last 3 years with that count at a county board meeting coming up. But that when the fragmented 40 acres and the 20-acre pieces were given the green light to be sold, then what we did was we give notice to all the cities and townships. And what happened there was some cities and townships didn't want some of these parcels to be sold, whether it was some 40 acres and there's a couple of a 3 and a 5 acre piece in the city of Nisswa that kind of really shed some light on where we needed some guidance for our land sales. And what it has to do with is two things that will mainly focus on land sales. One is how we go about our business with the HRA.
Tim.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm having the video you can see in the corner is froze on the Teams meeting.
Okay.
So I think I might need to restart the Teams meeting to unfreeze that meeting because
Okay.
it's streaming okay on YouTube. So would you be okay with me shutting this down and having everybody come back in?
Does everyone understand what we're doing?
Thumbs up. Okay, so I am just going to shut this down quick and I'll bring it right back up. And then please join in. Thank you, and sorry.
I knew I should have brought coffee.
We are still recording on YouTube, just so everyone knows.
Should I pause till they're back up? Or do you want me to keep going? Okay.
Well, the video looks good, so that's good. Okay, it looks like everybody is back on, and you can see and hear us.
Can everyone hear us?
Oh, wait,
Thumbs
no,
up?
my mic's off, sorry. Okay, now can everyone hear us?
Yes.
Okay, and see us, you can see Gary is at the table, scratching his
Yes.
ear. All right, we're good to go, sorry.
Gary?
Okay.
You'll continue?
So in this land asset management policy, it starts on page 9. We're going to ask you guys for a consensus today on one major thing, but shed some light on how we handle, how we go about sales to the HRA so it's more clear. We had a situation in the city of Breezy Point where a developer requested, I can't remember now, 100, 150 lots. I'm sure John Schomer, he's online, if you needed the exact amounts, again, I can't remember, but it was quite a few. And the discussion there was how many should somebody be able to request at one time? Or should we get some kind of more information on what's going on when that large of a amount of land is being requested to be held before we go to try to sell it? So we're just trying to get some better process there with the HRA. We have met with them and came to, I think, a pretty good agreement on what they're trying to do, what we're trying to do, and how we can work better together with better communication. So we had learned, we learned a little bit there with what happened in the city of Breezy Point this year. So on page 10, you'll see the number one, it's outlined as number one, a better defined process that's going to be right in our land asset management policy and how we're going to work with sales to the HRA. A lot of nitty gritty in there, but really the biggest thing that caused some confusion is when we send notice for that we're going to sell property. So that initial notice to the city, township, we're sending it to the HRA as well. They have 30 days to say, oh, we were looking at some of these properties to do a potential project. Please, we would like some more time. So if it's within 30 days of that initial notice, we'll hold those properties and for up to 6 months and see what they need to do. If it's after 30 days, so we're moving closer to a potential public auction, we're going to, if it's the HRA, we're going to ask them, well, can you provide us some more information on why you're looking to pull these now? We're looking at potential, some development plans, nothing that's going to be really nitty gritty, but working with John over at the HRA, he has agreed that he could get us some more information so that we have a better understanding what they're trying to do, so that if we come back to you guys to say we need to hold these properties, you have a little more information if we do so, because you have people that'll want to buy them and going, why are they withheld? So maybe we could have just a little bit more information on what's going on. So that's really, without going through all of it, that's the big change there. It's not a huge change, it's just some real subtleties on how we can better work with the HRA to accomplish not getting any miscommunication. And so if they're working on a project, we're not also trying to do something and it's like, didn't you know this or that? And I think it's going to keep us all in a better spot. Any questions on the sale to the HRA and what we were going to do there? Okay. Maybe we should ask Mr.
Paul, any questions? Commissioner Coring?
No, Mr. Chairman. Hold on a second. Let me put the video on. I don't have any questions. I just have a statement. I guess the way I look at this is, as a county board or as a county commissioner, ultimately I have to look out not only just for District 1, I have to look out for the good of the entire taxpayers of Crow Wing County. And when the HRA or the city or the township, and I've had some of my townships say, oh, well, we don't want you to sell that land. Or if we're going to have a city or the HRA buy that or take that land, for little or nothing, I don't know that that benefits all the taxpayers overall. For example, you know, if the city says, well, I want that property, but we don't want to pay the value that you have on it, where if we put it on the auction and we could sell it, all the taxpayers overall would benefit by that sale. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but I just want to make sure that we're looking out, make sure we're looking out for the taxpayers overall when we're trying to market these parcels. I think that's what our duty is. Anyway, that's all on that for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the sale of land to cities or townships. We could actually put in there any municipalities if you'd like. Mainly it's city or townships that are players. I suppose school districts also could be considered. We would follow the same course of action that we would with the HRA as far as the 30-day notice. So if they contact us within the 30 days, we'll withhold it without question. After 30 days, we're going to ask a little bit more of the why and what's going on before we would withhold it. That's what we'd be doing there with the sale of the to the city or township. But here's where we need direction, some consensus, so that we know what we can bring to a county board or have an idea of what you guys maybe are looking for to bring to a county board for action. We have option 1 or option 2 here when we sell property to a city or a township. Option 1 is that the property is offered for sale and it's basically sold at estimated market value. So whatever the assessor's office would value that property at, that's what we would ask the city to pay. What we didn't go in here is, if you would like, we could also put in here, we could do a payment plan if they would like. Wanted just to have some discussion on that, if there's even any appetite, before we kind of went into maybe just kind of putting that in here so that it would be an option for them. Option 2 is that you would keep, and it's no pun, but the best way I can explain this is, again, option 1 is we just sell at what the market value is. Option 2 is that you still would have the option to sell at estimated market value, or you could consider conveying that property to the city or a township for virtually nothing if it was used for a public purpose that is defined in statute. So there is that option out there. And this is what has happened, a little history with the city of Nisswa, that we'll need to make an ultimate decision here one of these weeks. Is we give them notice that we are going to sell 2 pieces of property on Camp Lincoln Road. They didn't want the property in private ownership. They believe it's better served in public ownership. From a county's perspective, it wasn't good enough for us to manage the timber or any recreation from a county perspective. But the city has proposed through NRAC a city park, and they've asked that we convey the property to them. So the discussion has went to, okay, the city of Nisswa wants the property. Our question is, do we just convey it to them, or should it be sold to them at either estimated market value or some discounted thing, or number or price for you guys to consider? So we have that one. We also have a situation in Breezy Point that will be coming to you in future meetings too, that they've bought 3 pieces of property, 3 lots that they're going to make in part or an access to their Frisbee disc course or park in their city, and they will be looking for a refund, but that's a little bit different. But I just want to, as a refresher, that you'll have 2 issues coming from 2 different cities about conveyance of tax forfeited property to the city. And the decision or some of the guidance that we're looking for is, how would you like us to get the property conveyed to those cities? Charge, at estimated market value, or just convey because they meet one of those public purposes. So in a little bit of, I don't want to confuse the issue, but a little bit more information on stuff like this. Like, we'll get a request from, I'm going to pick on the city of Baxter a little bit. They have a lot of big city. They've been expanding and doing a lot of road construction and infrastructure. And they've had some stormwater ponds the last 3 or 4 years that they've needed to create and take over. When they come to, and it's been on tax forfeited property. And we've conveyed that to the city of Baxter, but we've had to charge the estimated market value because in statute, it is not defined as one of the defined public purposes. A public road is one thing, but it doesn't say stormwater management is. A park is, and I think we have them listed in here for you, all the different things that can be. I have a sheet here to help. One of the requests was some history on what have we done in the past with cities and municipalities, townships, when we've sold property or conveyed property to them in the past. And you'll see we've had other things go to cities, but it wasn't for one of these identified statutory purposes. So we really focused on what are these that were sold to the cities or conveyed that would have met the criteria for option 2. And so Breezy Point, they put in a fishing pier on the channel there by Breezy Point Resort. They paid $17,000 and some odd dollars for those lots. That was the estimated market value, so that was not given to them, even though that was for a public purpose and would have met the definition of what option 2 is. Pequot Lakes, they wanted to have a better access in part of their city to the Paul Bunyan Trail. They paid for a piece of property to do a connection. That also was at estimated market value. And they also bought a piece to enhance a public road, and they paid, on this sheet you don't have, but about $1,100 for that piece for the public road. Nisswa as well, in 2016, paid $2,200 for a piece that would have been a public road. All of those could have been considered and conveyed for $0 if you would have so chosen back then, but it wasn't. They did pay. And Cross Lake also had a little sliver that they needed for a public road. Conveyance with no charge, this has happened twice that we've found, and they both happened in the city of Emily. 2007, 2 parcels were conveyed to them for a public road. And then just in 2020, spring of 2020, a roughly 39 acre piece on Little Emily Lake was conveyed to them for a public beach. And there was no charge for that. So the question, to sum all that up, is do you want a policy here that just says we will charge estimated market value every time, done deal, it's pretty clear, or do you want to reserve the option out there for things that may come up that might really be good, for that city or township, but might have a pretty good impact to other folks in the county that you may want to just go ahead and convey the property without charge. Open for questions on that. That's really the nitty gritty on this one, where we're looking for direction from the board.
Discussion. Commissioner Franzine.
Well, the majority of the time, we've sold the property for estimated market value, which is option 1. I think that's where we should be at. This is taxpayer property, so, you know, even though we're talking about giving this to other governmental agencies, I believe that our taxpayers are owed the option of us doing what's best with their money. And I wouldn't mind, you mentioned a payment plan, I wouldn't mind, you know, having some kind of a payment plan, like they could pay for it over 5 years or 10 years or however many years seems reasonable. But I don't believe in giving taxpayer money away.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Commissioner Francine on that also. Sometimes I wonder about the market value. I mean, is there any difference sometimes in regards to what that may be, or should it, I mean?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Brecken, absolutely. You know, when the Assessing Services Department, in one of my hats, county assessor, puts a value on a piece of property, the number one reason is for property taxation. But when we do look at to sell these, we do try to come up with what our opinion of value is. And unfortunately, it can vary vastly depending on the intended use of who's buying it. You know, a good example could be when the Mississippi Northwoods property was purchased for almost $12 million. Our office only had $6 million on it, right? But the intended use of potentially one day this master development and stuff, we just couldn't see that, but it's just an opinion. I don't think there's any right or wrong, but I do think sometimes we get some criticism on the value of a parcel. But all I can say is we use the sales in this county to help justify or solidify what those values should be. And we're always asking if we're missing information on a piece of property, whether it's restricted by zoning, whether it's unbuildable and we are unaware of a flooding issue or something like that, always trying to ensure that our values are, for the most part, pretty accurate. But I'm not going to say that we're perfect, because we're also not. But if I would think that you guys maybe would like to put in here, just as a suggestion, if a city has a greatly different opinion of value or what they think it is, that they would have the right to have an appraisal done, an independent third-party appraisal, to say, look, we want to buy that, but we had an appraisal done and it's saying this. County board, will you consider that value potentially than what the estimated market value is coming from land services?
Commissioner Hoag.
Is there a option of somewhere between your market value and, say, that dollar that, you know, I guess my thinking here is we want to be good partners with our cities and townships. In essence, this is really, tax forfeit is their property as well, as much as it's ours. But maybe there's a formula or something that would give some type of benefit. A lot of these projects don't just necessarily, you know, you think of, and not necessarily tax forfeit, but you look at the fire tower and the Milford, some of those, they benefit the entire county, sometimes the state, sometimes, you know, out of state tourism to our areas, and being good partners to them, depending on the actual use that they're thinking might benefit, you know, the entire county. It might benefit the neighboring townships, whatever. But if again there's some type of opportunity maybe to come up with a call it some type of meet halfway or something, if that could be an option, I don't know. I'm just thinking of how we could present this as being good partners in improving some of the communities and helping out our cities and townships. But I just throw that out as a thought. I don't know if it's...
Mr. Chair, I think we're kind of where Doug's going with this a little bit. We just had that situation in Breezy Point where the county discounted the land up there 25%, and we sold 42 lots. So, I mean, part of that gets to be is that if we could give a little bit of an incentive, you know, for that, so that otherwise it's going to stay on the tax rolls, or I mean on the tax forfeit land. Our goal is to you know, I'll say not get rid of it, but to be able to move on from that and have somebody else in control, because we want to have larger contiguous properties that the county owns. So, I mean, you know, if we ever thought that we would be discounting those, you know, in the future, just to be able to get those sold like you did in Breezy, that was pretty effective. That was really a good idea, you know, and it got a lot of lots back on the tax rolls.
Commissioner Coring, did you have anything to add?
Mr. Chair, I would just say that I would concur with Commissioner Franzine. I agree wholeheartedly. Like I said before in my first statement, I think we got to look out for the entire good of all the taxpayers, not just one municipality. So I would concur with what Commissioner Franzine said.
Mr. Chair, to your point, Commissioner Hoag, you definitely can set the value at what you want it to be. When a city comes to you and it's going to be used for a purpose under statute, you can sell it for, you can just convey it, or you can set a different value. You can't do that if it's not in one of these. We will sell at estimated market value. So I just want to draw a little bit of a point that it either has to be for one of these specific statutory requirements, otherwise it will revert to, we just sell things at estimated market value. You know, if they were gonna do something that isn't defined in statute. But the two that will be coming in front of you will be, I believe, for both public parks that would be under that. So you could do a, you know, if it's for a statutory public purpose, that it's 50% of the estimated market value, it can be 25%. Commissioner Brecken, to your point, the two pieces in Nisswa, I believe would have sold at estimated market value, and even maybe would have been more, very desirable pieces of property. It's just that area, and the city didn't believe that they wanted to see any more houses over there, so they'd rather see it as a park. So the discounting there, sure, they would have sold even quicker, but they definitely would have, I'm sure, would have sold for, in that situation. But in some other situations, definitely, when we look at discounting, it has been that there's been enough time and evidence that they didn't sell at the number we have. So it's not common sense, but driven by data, at some point you got to look at price. And then that's where we start to say price maybe has to come down. But that's what we're looking for here, is trying to zero in on that amount that needs to be, so we can get back to these cities on what we're going to do to move forward.
If you're looking at option one, Gary, and Commissioner Franzine, you talked about a payment plan. Do we need to set, just so we all understand, is there a time limit that should be put on that? So a maximum time could be something less, but certainly a maximum time allotment.
Yeah, that's what I kind of asked Gary. Would 5 years be appropriate? Would 10 years be appropriate? You know, I don't know. And maybe that 5 years or 10 years or whatever depends on the price. Maybe we could have, if you have from 0 to 10,000 or 100,000, it would be a 5-year, that you could possibly have a 5-year payback. Or, you know, we're asking more than that, I believe, for the property in Baxter, so maybe that could be a longer payback. Maybe it goes by how much money, I don't know. But I don't think, you know, I think that for any governmental agency to just come up with $500,000 or something, that's pretty unreasonable to think that they can come up with that in one lump sum payment, and maybe it isn't. You know, that's just my thinking. Maybe nobody else feels that way. But I don't think a payment plan is a bad idea. I don't know whether you want to add interest with a payment plan, or whether you just want it to be a flat, you know, you paid this much and you pay this much back. I think those are all things we have to think about, but I want option one. I don't think option two is anything that I care to deal with.
And I think Commissioner Coring concurs with you.
Yeah, I basically
Brecken
concur also.
concurs with that. Commissioner Hoag?
What, are we saying, we're picking one of these options and that's it, or
Yes.
do we have,
So,
can we not keep both options, and then, depending on the property, have a discussion? And, you know, maybe we potentially set a discounted rate off of your market value, so it's consistent all the time. But again, some of these, depending on the projects that the cities and/or townships, this is what draws people to our communities, which potentially could have spin-offs of other businesses, other housing projects. You know, there's just long-term benefits from some of this as well, and to get into such a firm policy, I think, could potentially deflect some of those opportunities.
Well,
Some of these are fairly significant values but have the potential to bring in other opportunities. So I just, it would be nice to have that option out there as an option if and when these come forward. So.
Commissioner Franzine.
well, and I totally disagree with that. I think that's why this was brought before us with two options, so we could choose one, so we could do something and be consistent. You know, if you've got all these, you might just as well not have a policy. That's the way I feel about it. I mean, you need to have some structure to what you're doing.
Mr. Chair, and I agree with having some structure, but I think that there needs to be, and that's the problem with policy. Sometimes we set policies and we kind of live and die by the policy. I think we have to have that flexibility to know and understand what the bigger picture is. But I think by saying and having the policy that basically we're going to be selling properties at market value that's where we start. Now, if they come with another proposal and there's benefit that we see that really benefits everybody within the county or the economic development, then maybe we need to take that into consideration. So I don't think it's necessarily a totally black and white, because I think you always have to address the individual issues too. But I think from a policy standpoint, we're going to try to do it at market value. But it may be the county comes up with a different thing and say, hey, we need to move this so that we can do some other things too. So there's always going to be an exception to the rule.
One question for you, Gary. If you convey a piece of property to another government unit, and 40 years from now, they decide that they don't want that park.
Mm-hmm.
So they rip it apart and they decide to sell it for development to a developer. They can't do that.
Typically, we put in the, some of the terms that must stay as a public purpose, and if it doesn't, it reverts back to us.
Reverts back, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that.
If I could, on the payment plan, which could help quite a bit, some of the cities, I get the idea of, well, on an amount, let's say 50,000 or over is a set years, and it's less if it's lower than that. The only thing is, it's all relative to a city as well. $50,000 number to Baxter is going to be a different challenge than a 50,000 number to the city of Riverton, let's just say.
Right.
So what I would just propose, or what we would bring you, is maybe some flexibility, or to help if a city really wants a piece of property, that we try to partner with them the best we can, and maybe we limit to a 20-year payment plan. If you guys are okay with it. If that's too long, please let me know now. But that could help. They still would, buy the property for the EMV, but it would greatly help them finance it.
Well,
MZ.
I agree with Gary about that. I mean, you think of one of these little towns who has very little revenue. We have to do something about that. And I also agree with Bill about, being able to reduce the property. But I don't think that if this property becomes tax forfeited this year and the city of Baxter or some other entity sees it, I don't think it should be given a discount right away. I believe that the public has to have the first option, before we reduce the price.
And Commissioner Hoag, just to make sure you are nodding your head on the 20 years, you're okay with that? If for a payment plan?
Well, again, I think there's got to be some flexibility in that, depending on the value, the price of the property, as well as the size of the city or township.
So when they bring it back, would you be comfortable with a 20-year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Coring, would likewise for you?
Yes, it sounds perfect, just the way it is, option one. I think that there has to be a case-by-case basis on the payment plan. Some cities might be able to pay it off in 5 years. Some cities might need 10 or 15 years. I guess that's like Gary said, working with them to see what option best fits them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll try to be as flexible as we can. Ryan was just saying there are, a lot of the payment plans are set in statute, so the maximum years, I'll take a double look and we'll see what we can do there. But we'll follow statute, of course, and we'll bring you something back at probably the next board meeting for you to consider. If it's okay, there are numerous changes that we would like to update this policy, so we'd almost, if you guys are okay with that, we would like to update this whole land asset management. There's a lot of different things that need to be either updated or we just think are better ways of doing things since 2017, and just wrap it all together and have you guys look at a more comprehensive update. Would you be okay with that? We'd have it as a regular agenda item, so we'd give you the information, in the regular packet, and you definitely could have discussions beforehand too. And of course, at that meeting, looking to try to update the whole policy so that you guys are hopefully in agreement with how we're handling our tax forfeiture policy with a lot of different stuff. You guys see easements all the time, well, not all the time, but it's one of the more regular things that you guys happen to see, and we have some verbiage, updates to that as well. And
So you're talking about redoing this whole policy,
the biggest change is right here, what we're talking about today.
but you're talking about bringing these back or recommendations back to our next board meeting, which is next Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, so it won't be the next one, I apologize. It'll probably have to be the one after that.
Okay.
So you
That
guys
seemed
have
like
some
a
more
pretty
time.
short timeline to
Yeah.
do all this.
We pretty much have it already, but we didn't want to bog down that discussion today that needed to be done about the land sales with all that other stuff. It just gets to be so much.
Okay. Everyone's good? I think you're all great,
Okay.
not just good? All right, we'll move on then. Timothy Township and Crowing Township, county forest land donation. Gary and Ryan. Ryan seems to be kind of lost.
I believe, Tim, were you starting? What's that? Oh, yeah, you bet.
Morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
So, folks, I want to take you back a little bit, and Commissioner Coring, I emailed out the material that I'm walking through, so you should have it in your email box. If you don't, let me know, and we can certainly put it up on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, I already did get it. Yep.
So I want to take you back to a conversation that two of you are not going to remember. Commissioner Coring, I'm going to ask you, because I think you were one of the leaders in this development of this policy. We had all these small parcels of tax forfeited property. They were peppered around the county. We were maintaining them. There's a holding cost for them. And we had a discussion at that point about how can we go about marketing those and getting them back out in the tax rolls. And Commissioner Coring, I think you might remember kind of that driving force was get those small parcels back on the tax rolls. During that conversation, we were also talking about the acquisition of larger parcels that would be immediately adjacent to either tax forfeited land holdings that we already had or that made sense to us for forestry purposes. Usually those two are the same thing. And so it was this divest of some and acquire others. And what I put together for you here was the material from back in 2018. And it showed you the top 5 acquisitions and the top 10 divestments. And so we were looking at which ones can we get rid of, which ones can we acquire. And I wanted to bring you back to that conversation because I'm not sure if we're bringing you projects that are consistent with your wishes today. And so staff is proceeding on the presumption that that sort of policy discussion is still the policy of the county. And so we've brought you a number of potential acquisition properties recently that you have rejected. And the primary reason for the rejection is usually that there's some string attached. And it has been a recreational trails string that has been attached. And that's okay. It's okay if you want to tell us that if an acquisition is going to have a recreational trail requirement that it be posted as not allowed, then we're not interested. That's okay. You can tell us that. It's the lack of clarity that I would like to seek today. Do you wish to modify that policy to include that, or should we be continuing to bring them to you and you'll deal with them on a case-by-case basis? That's a little bit dicey because we're dealing with sellers who may be waiting on us. Do we wish to not acquire any of these? Do we wish to acquire these kinds of parcels with our own resources, in which case we can do so without any strings attached to it? So it is in that context that I wanted to bring you back to. That's what we're pursuing, and I'm getting the sense that maybe we're off. And I just wanted to seek clarity from you about what is the direction that you want us to pursue as it relates to that when there is this string attached. I think as long as we're using someone else's money to purchase it, there's going to continue to be strings, whether it's this one or a different one. If we don't want to have any strings, then we can insulate ourselves from that by using our money. That obviously isn't, always the most attractive either. So we have, and if you go back to the list that I gave you, this is from 2018, the acquisition divestment priorities. The example that we have, and we have folks today here who will present on this one, is number 5 on that acquisition divestment list. We've had a variation of this parcel in front of you before, and so I don't want you to think we're just continuing to try to push until we get yes as an answer. It is this confusion about should we, shouldn't we, are we supposed to be, are we not? And so I would like to, we have this parcel that you can talk about and use it as an example, and I would like Emily and Todd to present on it. Think about it in this context of, I'd like to get some clarity and direction for staff for the future, and then tell us what you want us to do with this parcel. So does that make sense? Emily?
Mr. Chair, could I weigh in?
Commissioner Coring,
Yes.
go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'd like to weigh in and just say that I haven't changed my mind as far as what we talked about several years ago. Yes, there's a lot of little parcels that don't really make any sense for us to hang on to. If you remember, I even said, is there any way that we could get a realtor to help us market those parcels and get rid of parcels that don't make any sense for Crow Wing County to hold? Then I agree that we should pursue, if we have a parcel that's 500 acres and there's 100 acres that's for sale right next to it that would fit into our land management program, that would make total sense to buy that. But what I have a problem with is these groups that keep coming at us that are going around and buying this property, but then coming to us and stipulating how we're going to manage our property. I just went through an election. I'm elected. My job is to represent the people of Crow Wing County. That means that I have the right to say how Crow Wing County is managed, and the 5 county commissioners do. So for us to give that right to some other group that says, oh, you can have this land, but here's the strings, this, it just isn't right. If they want to give it to us and let us manage it the way we manage all the other 105,000 acres, great, I'm all in favor of it. But it almost makes it sound like they're smarter than us. They know how to manage the property better than us. And I haven't changed my mind. I mean, if these people are going to go and buy these parcels up and then come to us and say, no, you can't have any more trails, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, I don't want the property. And I'm going to be of no vote every single time. Bring the property, let us manage it. I think we know what we're doing. And the citizens of Crow Wing County have went to the voting booth and elected us to be the custodians of the property in Crow Wing County. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Todd, if you would like to go ahead, or Kim or Emily?
I think I would defer to Kim or Emily in this case. They are the transaction agent. Maybe just as a point of clarity for the board and for all the participants here, I guess in introducing Kim and Emily again to the conversation, their role, the Conservation Fund, their role is that of a transaction agent. And the meeting that Mr. Houle referenced back in 2018, I was present at the Committee of the Whole meeting for that conversation. Emily and I were present with staff, Gary and Ryan, and actually a DNR forestry voice as well, to kind of discuss land asset management specifically for forest and get some direction from county staff as to what their priorities were and were they open to that. And so in 2018, we got a pretty strong support from the county that acquiring not just random parcels, but parcels that they had identified, that the county had identified as priority acquisitions for the county, with that we were on the right path. And then we approached the board and to Commissioner Coring and Mr. Houle's presentation, we kind of took a direction that yes, in fact, we could pursue funding for those tracts because we were in line with what the county's overall larger objectives were. So we did that. The Conservation Fund went forward with the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund proposal, an ask for state funding, and were successful. And they had the support of Crow Wing and Cass County and the Camp Ripley Sentinel Landscape, whom I represent, because that was a comprehensive look at trying to acquire with state legacy funds lands that really met the county's goals and objectives. So we followed that path. They were awarded the funding through Lessard Sam's. They worked with Potlatch to bring all of this forward, and that's kind of where we are. So that it's really been a good path along the way, but for the funder, the Outdoor Heritage Fund, the Lessard Sam's Council, does in fact say you can do all of the things, like 90% of the things that you want to do. And the land doesn't have a cost to the county for its acquisition, but for the recreation trails and that string that Mr. Houle talked about. At the county board's request, the Conservation Fund brought this forward. We all were here. Commissioner Haug suggested that we ask for flexibility on the trails front, because what Lessard Sam's was saying, just to refresh everybody, was that you can do trails, you can have those recreational uses and do your forestry, but managing for forestry, the natural resource, is really the priority of the Lessard Sam's Council, and they too are bound by policy and statute in how they can award their funding for parcels. And so we went back to the Conservation Fund, and I think Commissioner Barrows went back to the Lessard Council to be heard on this with Commissioner Haug's recommendation to explore flexibility, and came back with a really significant outcome. And that significant outcome was the Lessard Sam's Council approved that you could work within the existing cartways, logging roads, trails that are there, and the county has flexibility to move those around. So in 10 years or 20 years from now, we can't all foresee the future, but in 20 years from now, if the need to move the trail or recreational access from north-south to east-west, the county had complete flexibility to do that. Still staying within the no net gain concept of trails and recreational use, but could have the flexibility. That hadn't really been clarified before, and so that was a really big success from that conversation for specifically Crow Wing County. So here we are, and I think there have been some additional updates. I think Kim and Emily, I'm not sure who was presenting, but I'll turn the baton over to kind of since then, other pieces of the conversation.
Great, thank you, Todd. And I'll go ahead and just say good morning, commissioners and chairman. Thank you for the invitation. This is Kim Burns Melhus. I'm the state director with the Conservation Fund. And I just want to echo what Todd was saying in his opening remarks, that we do not go out and buy land just to buy land. We do this, we buy the land at the request of the county. So I'll turn it over to Emily to run through the updates, and Ryan and Gary, but just want to say thank you again for the invitation to address you this morning. Emily?
Yeah, good morning, and thank you, commissioners, for having us here today. And yes, Tim laid the groundwork there for the history of the invitation to work. I believe it's the land asset management plan, which is actually what Gary was talking about in the first presentation as well. So a lot of this is tying into that plan. So the updates since we last spoke, I think one piece that we were missing, and we definitely have done some work on that since, is to vet the project with people who live in Timothy Township. Matt Wernicke with the Ideal Snowmobile Group, who manages and cares for the snowmobile trail that runs through the Timothy Township property. He and I have talked quite a bit on the phone, and I included an email in the packet for their support of the county's ownership and long-term management of the timber of that parcel. And then fast forwarding past that email, on October 8th, I wasn't able to attend this meeting, and maybe Todd or Kim could give a bit of an overview, but the Timothy Township Board met on October 8th and discussed this acquisition at length. And actually, I believe Ryan and Gary were at that meeting as well. Ryan created a great analysis of the timber revenues that are potentially possible given the timber data that we have on the property. And I believe that was discussed at the township board meeting, because that was definitely something they wanted to know. What is the long-term economic, potential benefit or impact to us at the township? And that was, I thought it was a really great analysis. So Ryan, if you have anything to add on that, that's some of those metrics are included in the agenda packet.
In specifics, that the acquisition would bring in about $180,000 of timber revenues, but that's over a period of 45 years, which is an Aspen kind of rotation age. So every 45 years, periodically, we would receive chunks of that $182,000 as the timber is harvested. That's essentially the gist of the timber revenues. But I think Tim really summarized it perfectly to start. I think everybody could probably agree this is a great acquisition. It fits within to help consolidate county lands. The real question is the strings that are attached, and is that worth it to acquire through these grant funds?
So thank you, Ryan. I just want to say, from my perspective, the whole process of this property, we have two things that we're talking about here, and that's our land asset management program, and on the other side is our recreational goals for Crow Wing County. And I believe that one isn't any more important than the other. We certainly receive benefits from both of those. But I think when Ryan and Gary and I spoke to Lessard Sam's board, a major step was taken by that board in a 7-4 vote to give us the right to have no net gain trails on this property. So even though there's strings to some of these properties, I believe that this whole process is about when boards change as time moves on and they see that there's benefits that counties need to have in managing their properties. And I believe that even in some of the other types of purchases that may take on, and the strings are perhaps a little more difficult to address for us through our recreational trail process, that there is opportunity, and we need to be patient with it, that these boards change, the goals or the way they look at it changes, and we get this. Now, I know that Northwood's property, which was probably the initial driver of some of the feelings here, took place back in, can you give me a year, Tim?
16?
Okay. And so it's taken 4 years, 5 years, something like that, for that board, the Lessard Sam's board, to change how they look at things, and to get a vote of 7-4 shows that with the patience and coming with the right proposal, we can get something that we want. And I believe that we'll get more as time goes on. So to me, we have to look at, first of all, our land asset management program, and are we committed to that 105,000 acres as a bigger parcel that we want to manage, makes it more efficient and is a better process for us, but also somehow having those trails in there. So in terms of where these properties, and this is 320 acres, I believe, right next to a significant portion that we already own up there in Timothy Township. Mm-hmm. Even if it was just about timber sales, I would say this makes sense for us to accept this property. I think it's a good thing that the county, that Gary and Ryan have brought this to us, and that we should really embrace this at this point. But everything is about compromise. And I know that the commissioners that were around in the Northwoods Property Day were upset and felt like, boy, this is a solid thing. Lessard Sam's has given some ground, and I think that we have to consider from our perspective now, in this day and age, that we have to give something also. And with that, we will get to where we all want to be, and it'll be the best outcome for all of us, both on our land management side and on our recreational side. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I also had the opportunity to attend that Timothy Township meeting. I was looking for their input, what they were feeling and suggesting on that. From that meeting and the information that Mr. Holman shared and that Ryan shared was very helpful, I think, to them too. And so they did pass a resolution supporting the purchase of this. That's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that the township, who, you know, it's the property in their township, that they weighed in. I also have been in communication with Mr. Warnicki. There is a snowmobile trail that is going through that property. If that property would fall into privately held hands, they could be shut off from that. And so again, Ideal Snow Pros supports the acquisition of this property as well, which also enhances our trails and tourism opportunities. So I see myself, again, seeing that there is flexibility there, that the Lessard Sam's is coming with, and again, we're seeing support up in that area to receive the acquisition of this property.
Commissioner Holt?
I just want to echo both of their comments, but as well thank Emily and Kim for actually taking this no net gain suggestion forward. And in this case, it was received well by the committees down in the metro. And it's just a absolute win-win for both the forest management and the recreational opportunities in Crow Wing County. So I think it was a great first step, and hopefully in the future we still have these type of opportunities moving forward. So thanks for doing that, and I think again it's a win-win for Crow Wing County.
Thank you. Commissioner Franzine, anything to add, detract?
Well, I have to agree that as long as they'll allow us to keep the trails open, but that isn't what happened when we acquired Northwoods. That came with strings that we closed the trails. Yep. And we didn't realize that because when we were given the property, if you want to say given, we were told that we could manage it the way we manage our other property. And then all of a sudden, after we've acquired it, they ripped that out from underneath us. So I have a hard time with this because of the fact that we were told specific things before, and we weren't allowed to do those things. I mean, we even ended up in court with this gift. That's not a gift when you have to, fight for what you had agreed on. So I'm a little, it sounds great, but I'm a little concerned that once we acquire it, that something could happen again. And I would hope not. I would hope that after what we've gone through with Northwoods, that everybody would have learned that if there are trails, they need to stay. And we did end up finally, in the end, we were able to keep some, but we closed a lot of trails on the Northwoods property. And I don't want to see that happening. I started out years and years ago on the Baxter City Council, and I was on Parks and Trails there. And then when I got here to the county, I was on Parks and Trails, and that's now gone into the another group. And I've always been on the group that was in who wanted Parks and Trails. And so I'm very protective of the parks and trails in the area, and I don't want to ever have to end up in court because we've been told something. I mean, we had it in writing, and it was still contested. So I want to be able to keep the trails. If that happens that we can't, then I know I sound like I'm, but I'm very protective of the trails because there are a lot of people who use these trails all the time. It's part of our recreation. You can't just have a 300-acre parcel and all of a sudden they say, oh, you can't go through here, and the other part of the trail's on the other side. So as long as we are guaranteed, in an ironclad guarantee, that once we acquire it, they won't try to say, oh, you can't have that anymore, then I agree with this. But, I'm still on, I'm sure I'll vote for it, but I have reservations about,
I'd just like to add to that, though, and I understand your hesitation, but I think getting that 7-4 vote, and that vote resonates across the state, not just in Crow Wing County, and I think there would be a lot of pressure if they were to try to move back on that vote at this juncture. So I think we're in good shape at this point, from my perspective. I think that was a real moment in Lessard Sam's life, their board, when they gave us that vote. So because it impacts the entire state. So.
But if they have a change, could that vote change?
Anytime
Or
a
is
board
that
changes,
vote?
thing.
Sure.
Commissioner Hool,
Commissioner Franzine,
or Administrator Hool.
thank you.
Sorry,
What's going to be important is what's in the agreement we have, in the grant agreement from Lessard Sams. And so we will ensure that it has the no net loss language in it. That, they could subsequently change their policy. That won't change the purchase agreement that we have. And so it is nailing it down in the purchase agreement. What I hear you guys, and that doesn't preclude, if I line up 100 attorneys, 99 of them will still find a way to file a lawsuit if they really want to. I can't give you that ironclad. I can give you, we will make sure it's in the agreement. And then I think if that did come to it, that is an issue you'd want to fight. It is an issue we fought with the Mississippi River Northwoods. And what occurred there was, when we submitted our grant application, we told them that we would manage the Northwoods property consistent with the county's forestry management plan. They didn't realize that we manage our forestry land to include recreational trails. After the fact, when they found that out, then all heck broke loose, and we did end up in quite a dispute. I am pretty confident in saying, had that Lessard Sams board been the one that you approached, I'm not sure you would have gotten your 7-4 vote. I do think that this is helping other northern Minnesota counties that have lots of recreational trail concerns, because it is a softening of their language. What remains to be seen, in my mind, is whether that degree of flexibility will allow us to do pretty much everything we wanted to do anyway. I think it will. I can't guarantee you that it will. What I hear you guys saying is, if there is no recreational trails allowed, we're not going to bring that forward. We're not going to let it hit your agenda. We're going to tell them no. If there is some flexibility about recreational trails, we will bring that forward. You could accept or reject on a case-by-case basis, based on the specific facts. This one, I wanted to point back, the materials that I gave you, the last page, the parcels we're talking about in this case, in the upper left-hand corner, it's the red one. There are 8 40-acre parcels that total 320 acres. That's this one. So you can see visually whether it fits in. So it's that one. And it is this parcel up here that we're talking about.
Mr. Chair, there's one more thing I want to point out, is not all trails are grant and aid trails. And I want to make sure that they know that whether it's a grant and aid trail or whether it's just a trail that people have been riding, that that's part of the net. It's not a gain if, if later on we make it a grant and aid trail.
We will identify, as part of the purchase agreement, all of the recreational trails that we know exist on the property. That includes a forest road.
And I would like to make sure that the ATV clubs who are in that area are consulted, because they know better than we do what they're riding.
Gary, you had something to say? Add?
I always do, you know that. Just a point of clarification on the two pieces of paper that Tim handed to you with the top acquisitions, the top 5 that we had brought back in 2018. This also includes number 3. Well, there's a 40 in Crow Wing that this purchase agreement would also include, if I'm correct. Kim, is that correct? I believe so.
That's correct, the 40 acres.
Yep. So this would be 2 of our 5 that we had identified a few years ago off the list. We did secure number 1, but I believe 2 and 4 have already been sold, I believe, out of potlatch ownership to private ownership. Just as a point of clarification.
Okay. And so our agreement would address both the 320 and the 40? Is what you're saying? Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, if my understanding is correct, that's what we're going to do. And I just want to make sure that we're only bringing you stuff that you want to consider. And as that direction could or would change, that's okay. We'll adapt. I just want to make sure we're honoring your wishes. That's all.
Well, and I appreciate everybody's work on this, Gary and Ryan with the Lessard Sams, Todd and Emily and Kim. I appreciate everything that you've done. Commissioner Brecken and Todd going up to the Timothy Township. I appreciate the board up there working with us, and Crow Wing didn't seem to be the same kind of issue, so they're being dragged with us, and I say that respectfully, but I appreciate that county board also. So thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to this on probably the next board agenda.
Yes, would you like a presentation on it again for public consumption, or would you like it on your consent calendar since you have reviewed it already?
I prefer the consent agenda, but
I do too.
Commissioner Brecken,
Consent's fine.
consent? Commissioner Hoag's consent?
And I appreciate, I think we have better clarity about what we're going to let come to your table, okay?
Just so we know, Commissioner Coring, you okay with consent? Hearing nothing,
He must
we'll
be.
move on.
When you don't vote, it's a yes.
Was I voting? I guess was you asking me a question?
The question was, do we want, 4 of us have said we would like it on the consent agenda. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
No, I adamantly disagree with that.
Okay,
No, I'm okay with that, that's fine.
all right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the Brainerd Lakes Regional Airport report. Mr. Wright, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for giving me the time to take some time to share on activities at the Brainerd Lakes Regional Airport. I am going to try to share my screen. So we are going to take, there we go. We're going to share. All right. There it is. So we're going to give you a little report on airport activities. And November is National Aviation History Month, so we'll start off with a little history. This airport has been co-owned by the city of Brainerd and Crow Wing County since the 1950s. So I just wanted to share the humble beginnings of this airport, starting off with a small shack that pilots could gather, as well as some of the aircraft that were coming and going out of this airfield in the beginning days. Over time, this airport has grown into a portal to the world, connecting central Minnesota to the global economy. We are placed very well with 2 runways over 6,500 feet long. We have redundant precision instrument approaches, allowing all of the modern flying technology and the aircraft to fly in all weather conditions. We have a modern passenger terminal building, new general aviation arrival departure facility with 24-hour general aviation access, hangar areas for commercial development, and T hangars for private and recreational purposes. And then I'll be describing further, we have areas available for future growth. Highlighting our airlines service, we have daily airline flights still serviced by Delta Airlines. These flight schedules continue to be available through the pandemic, but we have pretty much our 2 flights daily connect over 200 nations in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Just this last month, monthly charter service has been reinstated, serving Don Laughlin's Riverside Resort Hotel and Casino down in Laughlin, Nevada. So approximately once every 6 weeks, we are placing people on around 180 people on a 737 type jet, and they're flying to a vacation destination in Laughlin, Nevada. We've developed various government, commercial, nonprofit services at the airport. We're served by about 13 based businesses, employing over 90 individuals here at the airport. Various services, some are aeronautical, some are non-aeronautical, like AW Research Laboratories. They started with aeronautical business in mind, and they've transitioned to a non-aeronautical, yet they still like the airport campus to do their business. Some of the financial highlights, we're supported primarily by airport users or airport fees and charges sponsored by the City of Brainerd in Crow Wing County. City of Brainerd contributes to financial oversight of the airport, and then the Crow Wing County contributes routine legal services to the airport as well. Comprehensive reporting is included in the city's annual financial report. Just a quick highlight, and this is very big picture, airport finances. This is coming from the 2019 annual. We're running an operations budget of about $1.1 million. On the left side of the screen, you see airport revenues and how they break out. On the right side, you see the percentages of how our airport expenses break out. Economic highlights, we've had an economic impact study that was completed this last year by the State of Minnesota Office of Aeronautics. The airport brings in 14,000 visitors annually, area employment of about 275, payroll 12.2 million, spending 18.8 million with a total economic activity of 31 million. And then state and local tax revenues of about 1.3 million. So all of these are continued in a economic impact report, and my apologies that the report itself is very small on the screen. This report is available by going to the Minnesota Office of Aeronautics, Department of Transportation Office of Aeronautics. Just want to highlight, because it's Aviation History Month, this report was taken off of the United States Census. So revenue from airports, what airports mean to this country is $24.9 billion to the national economy. So just want to highlight what's going on at the airport right now in a quick snapshot. I've pulled our airline enplanements, and this is airline enplanements going through October. Prior to the pandemic, we were breaking passenger records, and people were flying out of Brainerd as you know, more than ever throughout that history since the 1940s. The pandemic hit in March, and you can see what happened in March and April of this year, where passengers have dropped significantly. Coming into July through October, you can see that we've hit a little plateau. The reason being is Delta Airlines has taken the initiative to only sell 60% of their seats. So if you want to take a positive out of this pandemic and a positive response to the Brainerd market, is the Brainerd market is purchasing all of the seats that are available to it. And that is why we have approached a plateau in terms of our passenger numbers. I want to highlight, because of this pandemic, the Brainerd Airport was the recipient of a pretty sizable grant, $18 million for the operations, maintenance, and development of this airfield. And so we have been speaking with the Federal Aviation Administration on the development of the airfield and the use of those dollars allocated to the Brainerd Airport out of the CARES Act. Right now, the way that is breaking out, we have about $4 million, and if you remember from our financial, that's about 4 years worth of operations and maintenance expenses. So we are using approximately $4 million to cover operations and maintenance of our airfield federally over the next 4 years. On the development side, an additional $14 million is available to pretty much implement vast majority of our 20-year master plan. A lot of that planning is the growth out to the new runway that was constructed in the mid-2000s. So our building areas, our airport users are growing. One of the main capstones event is the development of a airport rescue firefighting building and a new snow removal equipment building. The older facilities are extended past their useful life, and we need to highlight kind of the positioning of where our airport rescue firefighters are positioned on the airfield due to the new runway. So here's another snapshot of some of the development concepts of what we are doing at the airport. The yellow buildings that you see on this map are all existing buildings. The pink colored buildings are all buildings that will be developed. But basically in concept, it's filling in with the development capabilities along Highway 210 to allow the airport to grow. And that is the airport presentation in a nutshell. Is there any questions that the board may have?
Just as a point of interest, this is Commissioner Barrows. When you and I talked here a few weeks ago, I asked you if we could land the biggest planes that the big airports land, and you said yes. Our dilemma is we can't get them off the ground once we get them on the ground. So we can't solve that problem at this time. So that was an interesting point that we talked about. I have no questions. Other commissioners, questions? I know Commissioner Coring serves on the Airport Commission, so he's heard this spiel several times, I'm sure. But any...
Mr. Chair, the only thing, if I could say something?
Sure, go ahead.
The only thing I want to say, I just want to say publicly that Mr. Wright does an excellent job for the Airport Commission, and on behalf of myself and the people that I represent, I just want to thank him for his service and, you know, and continued service for the citizens of Crow Wing County and the city of Brainerd. Thank you.
I would concur with that, Commissioner Coring. I think, and I am out there many times, probably too often, to eat at Wings, and I see Steve frequently, and we talk about some of the plans that they have out there. So he does do an excellent job. He's on top of it all the time. He's always answered my questions and taken the time to sit and talk with me, so I would agree with you. I think he does an outstanding job. Other commissioners? I guess we're going to let you off easy today, Steve, but thank you very much for bringing us the presentation, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Coring. It is an honor to serve as your airport director, and we look forward to taking the challenge of bringing the airport through to the future.
Thank you. Any other business? Nope. Hearing none, we'll say goodbye to Commissioner Coring, and we are out of here. Thank you, everyone.